Hello! Not long ago I looked at this radio from BetaFPV. I think they're calling it the Light Radio 3. It's got inbuilt 100 milliwatt ELRS and I tested that out with a quad. I mentioned at the time there are a couple of flight controllers they sent to me to test with, and I want to look at these today. Hello, it's me from the future. If you're wondering, hey, I don't remember seeing the review of this one, it's because it didn't actually get released. It got finished and the idea was this was going to be sort of a part 2. I'll talk about why that happened in a little bit, but I just wanted to say this because I found when I came back I couldn't re-edit this in a sensible way where I wasn't referencing this all the time. So that's the explanation. Let's carry on. On this one we have an F4 1S 5 amp flight controller with built-in ELRS, and on this one we've got an F4, it says 1S but 1S or 2S, 12 amp F4 with ELRS obviously. And they've also brought out quads that feature these, and I happen to have the old versions of them. One of which is this one. This is the Meteor 65, quite a meaty little 1S quad. This had the SPI receiver, which was terrible range, but generally I flew it indoors so it wasn't all that bad. However, it's got some very high kV motors, so it does go a bit better outdoors. So it seems like a good thing to swap that out. And on this one, this is the BetaFPV 85 Pro 2. I think they're also calling it the Meteor 85, and the new version of that features this 12 amp version and runs on 2S, which is why I'm happy I can use it on 2S. I think they also replaced the cameras in both of these as well, because these were pretty poor. Again, this was very much an outside quad but had not great range, so I figured this would be an awesome time to swap out the terrible inbuilt SPI flight controllers with something better. Of course we could just add a receiver in there as well, that would be one way around it, but I've got these, so why not swap them? Anyway, first off, let's have a closer look of what you get in the box and how everything connects together. Okay, let's start off with this box. This is the F4 1S 5 amp with the integrated ELRS receiver, and you see here you get a little bag of bits. There's nothing too much, just a little bits that you constantly lose to put it in, and some little screws. The actual board itself is fairly basic. We've got the normal USB, we've got their BT adapter. On the bottom of the board here you can see that you've got that little ceramic antenna that worked so well last time. Quite where we sold everything else, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look at the existing board and see what we've got. Obviously the motors just plug in here, so most of it should be fairly self-explanatory. And this is what's going to go in there. It should be, by the looks of it, a pretty straight swap out. It looks like it's the same board, just goes around that side. Just a little bit of delicate soldering to do, I think, so that should be fairly straightforward. And then we've got this one. This is the 12 amp. It says 1S, but it's got to be 1S or 2S. It actually does say that on the board. So this is a little bit different. Firstly, we've got a more traditional shaped board. We've actually got another BT connector, but that's probably not going to stay there. And on this one, instead of a ceramic antenna, we've got a little UFL connector. Hence, we've got one of the antennas to put on there. We'll also note that there's no USB. We've actually got this. This connects to this cable there, that cable there connects to this, and you've got a USB Type-C. That's quite interesting because previously, in a similar way to the Whoop, we'd have had something on the bottom there that would have stuck through. And if we look at the quad it's going in, this is the Beta 85 Pro 2. That's exactly what we've got there. Just under there you see we've got the old micro connector. We have got XT30 because this takes a 2S, which are much easier to get there. And I just don't know what I'm going to do about that USB connector. And in the little bag of bits you'll see you've got the motor connectors to go on there, along with a bunch of sort of screws and bolts and holders and things. So yeah, a bit more to solder here. They all look a little bit delicate, especially the motor ones, but you know, we'll see how we do, I guess. You see there it says 1 to 2S. As far as the board goes, there's not an awful lot of imprinted text as you'd normally have about what's what. We've got a couple of things like an R1 T1 there, but the stuff down here is completely blurry, I can't see, so I'm going to have to trust that the existing board is similar. While I've got that open, I might put this in as another review. This is the Happy Model Open VTX, and I thought that might be a useful replacement for that one. And because this camera was very poor, I happen to have a spare Foxeer Razor Pico Cam. Not a review, I think I've already reviewed it, but it'd be nice to swap that out. As far as this one goes, I kind of stuck with what's in there at the moment, but that was... We'd replaced the camera once with BetaFPV's slightly better camera, but slightly better was still not up to the spec we wanted. So let's see if we can... It depends if it fits, really. We'll see if we can swap it out, and if we can, we'll do that. If not, we'll just put the ELRS stuff in. I'm not quite sure where that's going to go, but we'll figure it out. Let's just get on with it and see what happens.
So here's a bit of a pet peeve. If you use all black wires to join things, it's really hard to tell what's what. I think there's a very accepted standard that red is a positive, black is ground, yellow is video, and maybe something like white or green is smart audio. It at least gives you a clue. The problem with this is it doesn't match the pins of the new board. So in order to find out what I needed to take and connect to what, first I had to find a picture of the old board to tell me what was going on, which wasn't on BetaFPV's website. Then I could use BetaFPV's website to find the new board to see what went where. It was a little bit more straightforward on the other board because the VTX pins were actually quite well labelled, so I could just transfer over using this.
Okay, here's the finished articles. This one was pretty straightforward, went together okay. The larger one, not so nice. There's a couple of things that I didn't like that much. Apart from the fact that, you know, the black wire everywhere again, but this is just BetaFPV thing. The board doesn't really have a nice soldering points. They're kind of towards the middle next to some really small resistors. If they were right at the edge of the boards like these bits here, that would be a lot easier. I also noticed they didn't really consider this in terms of their own quad. So the antenna point is right where the screw would go in here. You see, I've had to cut away some parts of the camera mount there. I did manage to put in the better camera. This has got the Foxeer Razor Nano now. I'm still on the original VTX. I'm going to put this one in, but I managed to break it and destroy one of the capacitors. Good old me. Anyway, I've left the top off this one so I could easily access the USB connector. They should be pretty much the same in terms of how to bind and do stuff. So I'll do one, see how that goes, and if nothing untoward happened, I'll do the other one in the same, and I'll let you know if there's any changes.
Okay, so let's plug the little Meteor 65 into Betaflight and connect. Right, so you'll see some weird things are happening. First off, this uses 430, which isn't out yet at the time I'm putting this video out, and that's because the SPI support for ELRS isn't in the current version. It comes out at 4.3, and so this means you won't be able to just update your ELRS firmware on the board in the same way as you normally would, because it's kind of driven by Betaflight. Whichever version of Betaflight will drive the version of ELRS for SPI, and there's various other bits and pieces it won't do as well, like full telemetry and stuff. So what it would have done is reset a lot of this configuration for me, including things like the modes and my OSD, which is just sort of saying Beta ELRS F4. So if we go to the CLI, we should have little bits and pieces of ELRS stuff. So we've got the domain, which is set to ISM 2400, which is 2.4 gigs, so that's good. Hybrid switches, which I don't really know what they are, but that is the default value, which is off. The rate index, again, I don't know what that is. But more importantly, is something called the ExpressLRS UID, which currently looks like that. This is interesting because I think it's one of the ways we should be able to connect radio to the receiver. There are various ways of doing it. That you can type a bind command, you can go into the ExpressLRS Lua script and initiate bind from there, but the most interesting one, of course, is to use your bind phrase. Now, trouble is, we're not flashing the firmware here. What do we do? And the answer, I think, is this little thing. This is a little GitHub project where you can basically basically it takes our phrase and hashes it so we can put that into Betaflight. So if we go ahead and take that, shove it into Betaflight, and it says we have changed it. So let's save it, and I've got the radio on. Will it just connect? That's what it should do at this point. So if I go, yeah, it's out of date. If I go to my receiver tab, yeah, it worked. I know I sound surprised, but it's always pretty amazing. I'm using the little BetaFPV controller here, so I don't have access to anything like the Lua script. And the weird thing we're going to find on this, I guess, is in the configuration we are going to see it's on SPI with no SPI bus receiver. That's normal. I'm guessing this will change when we have the official release. Oh, that's cool. Anyway, I'm going to change all this about because it's all completely wrong at the moment. We've got, you know, bits and bobs all over the place here. I'm going to correct that. I'm going to go and do the other quad as well, put it back together. If there's any changes, I'll let you know, and beyond that, we'll then go out and attempt to fly them. Hello, welcome back to the corridor, where it's test time for these little guys, and I find myself having to second guess what I'm going to have to re-record, because yeah, I'm going to test these out with the ELRS, but I'm using a radio that I would be saying, hey, we talked about this last time, but we really didn't. This is the BetaFPV Light Radio 3, I think it's going to be called. I mistakenly thought this was a version of the 2, and so I put a video up ready for release, having reviewed this and tested it at range with my Aquila quad, and then BetaFPV told me, hey, that hasn't been released yet, this is a different radio than what we were talking about, so I'm going to have to re-release that and re-edit that when I get to it. Now, the reason I mention this is I tested this for range. My video was about setup and how to flash it, and then I decided to test range with the Aquila, and I came here and I flew over there, and first I tested it with the Namimno module and did a kilometre. The video was starting to go a bit patchy because, as you can imagine, there's a lot of trees in between us, but that was fine. The signal held up. We came back, went out with this one, and we had a fail safe. Well, we had the signal go really sketchy, dropped to about 40, started flashing at about 800 meters. I turned it around, and as I turned around, we fail safed. Fortunately, we got it back. So the range of this one, because it's got no external antenna, is not up to much compared to a regular one, but I figured the main source really of using this was for these little sort of whoops equipped with ELRS. Now, I'm not worried about the 85 because if you see there, it's got a proper antenna. The little 65, the Meteor, that has got that internal ceramic antenna. Now, I've had great success with ceramic antennas, but not with a radio that doesn't have an external antenna. But I just wanted to tell the story about where we were, because you haven't got the history of what's going on. I considered this kind of the part 2 of the radio, but now it's not part anything of the radio, and it's just about these boards. So there you go. Anyway, my idea is to fly it here down to the end there, which is about 200 meters, back up around. It's just to check the distance, really, make sure it holds up, because it's not very exciting to fly. And then we'll go up to there into the woods, which is more fun to fly around, and we'll probably hit some stuff and crash a lot and whatever. But let's see how the signal holds up, let's see how these respond, and let's get flying. So I tried the 85 first, and off to a very bad start. If you look at the front left prop, you can see it there, and as I increase the throttle, pshang, off it goes. It actually released 2 props which had gone loose. I didn't have any replacements, so I had to ignore this one for the day and go with the little Meteor 65 instead. Off we go on the Meteor 65, and the prop stayed in, so we're off to a good start. What didn't survive very well are these little 1S batteries, unfortunately. It looks like they're in a bad way, so they dropped directly from 4.35 volts down to 3.7 before we were even in the air, practically. So on the good stuff, you will notice that these little boards can run at 500 Hertz, as can that little radio that I shouldn't really mention, and we're getting a decent signal out here. So we've got the combination of a radio with no external antenna and a little flight controller with an inbuilt ceramic antenna. And this seems to be doing fine. I mean, I don't think you'd take a quad like this beyond about this distance, which, as I say, is about 200 meters. But you can see that the signal here is, you know, between 100 and 97 in link quality stats. So that's all good. it's not a very exciting flight. It's literally just like, can I get there and can I get back again? Will the battery last long enough? That was the big deal for me. The answer to this one is yes, just about. And I did another little very quick flight around here, just trying to do a little bit of acro, but really the battery didn't hold up. So off into the woods I went to see if we could get any differences there. And yeah, beyond the fact that I really need to put all these batteries in the bin, or dispose of them responsibly, whichever is easiest, it seems to be doing a fine old job. Again, this little quad, it may be a little bit small for this sort of tree flying. It looks a little bit too sedate. Indoors, this thing feels way too fast. This is really a sort of a racing little quad for being in the sort of indoor sort of sport hall type thing. That's where it really will excel. But it's good to know that you can go around a place like this with a quad that's pretty quiet and not very obnoxious, and you can basically go as far as you can and not really have a problem. The only problem I'm having is the fact that my batteries are lasting like less than a minute, pretty much. But yeah, again, you can see the signal's absolutely fine, holding up very, very well. On an SPI receiver, it was literally down to about 30, just going 50 meters. They were particularly bad, these ones. And it just made me really scared to think about it, because you just get a fail-safe instantly on those little D8 SPIs. But yeah, this worked well. However, we really need to test it on the little 85 sides as well. Take two. It's 1 week later, which means we've had 1 week of wind and rain, but the sun is out. Not that you'd ever get to think about it here, because it's there, and that's kind of as high as it's going to get. So this place here is now not going to dry out until March, so it's becoming very swampy like. Anyway, we've got a balmy 7 degrees Celsius, so it's not too bad. Fortunately, it's nice and still, not too much wind about. We will try and fly this again. I've secured the props, I hope, with a little blob of glue. Couldn't find any spares to try and see if they would friction fit better. Don't like friction fit props on quads this size, but yeah, let's try and get it up and down here, and then we'll do the same thing, get into the woods and see how that goes. And we're up. We've taken off. The props are still on. This is good news so far. I'm actually making sure I stay fairly close to the middle of the path anyway, just in case it goes down. It makes it very easy to get. I did notice immediately when I took off, I'm getting this jitter where it's yawing around to the right. I think something might be having some sort of rattle on something, or there's something pulling it over. But I'm figuring, you know what, I'm only doing 200 meters there and back. Let's just try and see if it does this and see if it crashes or not. That said, the picture I'm getting from this VTX is pretty bad. I'm getting a lot of breakup here. It's reportedly doing 200 milliwatts, although I'm not sure if that's right. It might just be 25, and the VTX antenna is probably pointing in a bad way. I think I'm getting a direct null at the moment from it. But anyway, we've kind of made it to the end, and that newer camera is certainly having a better looking picture. And yeah, the signal held up well. It got all the way there and it got all the way back again, but what I needed to do is take a quick look and see what that problem was.
Well, I was having a bit of a twitch. I don't know if it's because I've got this quite large cable, so I could put a bigger battery in. I'll try it with a smaller one without that cable, see what we get.
That's what I thought, but when I got to the woods, here's what it was. That little antenna was basically slightly lying down on one side, which meant it was hitting that prop. So what I did is stuffed it in the middle bit, which didn't create the best ever picture from the VTX, but at least it didn't get hit. So off we go, and well, there's two problems here. First off, that VTX is really not giving me a great picture. Secondly, at this time of year, where it's kind of weird, because it's like there's actually quite a lot of greenery here, and where it gets slightly overgrown, it's so much harder to pick the path out. And I'm just sort of going along here saying, where is that path? Occasionally I just veer off into the trees and think I'm on the path. I mean, I can barely see me there just on the left. But yeah, I mean, once again, we're talking about how the signal holds up, and we're talking about essentially how the craft seems to fly in the new flight controller. Got no particular issues on the flight controller. That seems fine. I don't really see the difference between this and the last one. They all feel much of a muchness. It feels a little bit sedate flying this thing, to be quite honest. It needs a lot more angle. But, you know, these batteries aren't in great shape either. It looks like all my smaller batteries. All my 2Ss are looking in bad shape. But you know, we're doing again a few hundred meters around some trees. Our signal is max speed, and it's pretty much staying at maximum link quality, which is all you really need from something. As I said, this has got a proper external antenna, so I did expect this to be decent, and yeah, it's doing a good job. If there's a problem with flying these very small quads around the trees, it's sometimes with larger quads I rely on being able to hear them just in case I sort of lose my track and want to know where they are. With this quad, it's so quiet, I couldn't tell where it was most of the time. It does have ducks, but they're very small, and this is pretty much whisper quiet as it goes around. But yeah, we had some good flying. I actually did 3 flights here. The second one got interrupted by a woman and her dogs. So I saw a woman walking towards me, so I landed, and then she explained that the dog got very upset around quads, so I just kept it away. And then in the third one, it all went a bit wrong. And this is the third flight, and generally I sort of get a bit more aggressive and a bit more up for it on the later flights, and I start off by crashing into a tree. And maybe this caused the problem, because I'm flying along here, and if you keep your eye on that front left prop, you'll see it disappear again. It's gone.
Yeah, looks like that prop didn't quite hold. Hitting out a tree probably didn't help. Came off pretty cleanly. Anyway, I think that's our flying for today on this one.
So conclusion wise, we've taken these out and we've flown them, and aside from the fact that the props don't tend to stay on this one very well, and all my batteries are absolutely knackered, looking at the flight controller on its own, those work pretty well. I don't think I'd say like, hey, take all your whoops, strip them down, get a new flight controller in there and replace them. You know, if you've just got like a whoop or something, maybe you'd want to do that if you're running out of range all the time. But I would say if you're building a new like 1S or 2S whoop and you don't want to, you know, think about having an external receiver, then getting something with built-in ELRS is really cool, because it's like there's no extra space it takes up and it gives you so much more range. It's like having a really decent regular receiver in there, except you haven't got like antennas sticking out and stuff. So that is the impressive bit. BetaFPV are now selling these types of quads, these sort of sizes, with the ELRS boards built in, and I'm guessing they will fit in a bit better. I think they've replaced the cameras as well, so everything's a little bit better. So if you're in the market for a new sort of 65 or 85 inch whoop, that's perhaps a thing to see. But in the meantime, I will say thank you to BetaFPV for providing the flight controllers that went in here. Think about, like, you know, updating the colours of the wires you use, that would be nice. And of course there's links down below where you can check it out in more detail. In the meantime, I hope that review has been helpful. I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.